Hey fellow knitters, Clubkidknitter here, and welcome to my Colorwork series. In this particular video, I'm going to show you how to do a Latvian braid. A Latvian braid is a form of stranded colorwork that involves carrying floats while you are purling. So if you've ever knitted flat fair isle knitting before, you obviously knit down one side, you turn your work, and then you purl back the other. So it is a form of purling. And what you're doing is you are twisting the floats or the bars, and twisting the floats and the bars are what create this chevron effect. And it's a nice way to add some a decorative aspect to your work. This that I'm working on is actually, and I just finished this particular portion. It's the liner, or it's a line to brim, and so what I'm going to do before starting the hat and crown is I'm going to put another Latvian braid at the top to kind of section off, or to really delineate the brim from the rest of the hat. But obviously the pattern does that too, but it's a nice decorative piece to add to your fair isle knitting. And you can do this in the round. You can do it on flat knitting. You can do it anywhere. You can do it at the start when you cast on, or after you've cast it on. You can do it somewhere in the middle of your work if you're sectioning off particular elements of your work. And then you can, which is actually what I'm getting ready to do now, is to do it in the middle of the work. And then after I finish the Latvian braid, I'll knit the hat and the crown. Now, you always want to do the setup row or the setup round for your Latvian braid. And that involves in every other color change. So I'm using this pink and this silver. And so I start with the pink, as I did down here, and then I alternate between the two, carrying each float as I go along. So that has to be done first. That's your setup for the actual Latvian braid that now we're getting ready to do. Now, the other thing I'm going to warn you, when you do this process, it will involve twisting your working yarns. So you'll have several twists as you're doing this, because you're twisting the yarn as you are actually knitting. So what I would recommend is letting out several yards of your working yarn. I actually do this and keep them ahead of me, so I'll actually toss these on the floor in front of me. But the good news is that when you come around on the second pass, you will be twisting the yarns in the opposite direction, so you will actually unravel the twist. I always get high anxiety when I see a twist like this in my yarn, and I always have to stop and untwist it. So this, when I first learned how to do this, I was kind of like, but trust and believe that it will unravel itself. But I recommend that you, again, let out several yards, because that will enable the twisting to happen so that you don't have a double twist. If you don't let out a lot of yarn and it keeps twisting and twisting and twisting, eventually it'll start to double twist. And for me, I cannot do that. So, but the way to avoid that is to let out enough yarn that allows the twists, because there's going to be 152 twists, because that's how many stitches that I have casted on. So, but in any event, that's kind of a tip for that. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to put on my place marker, or my stitch marker there. And then the first thing that you want to do is you want to bring both working yarns forward to the front of your work, because typically when we do fair isle, especially in the round, it's always in the back. So we want to make sure that it's in the front, because after all, we will be purling. So the first thing that you want to do is have your yarns laying down, and you're going to be purling every stitch, and you want to align the color with whichever color is on the in front of you. So for example, this first stitch is pink, so I will be purling with the pink. And then the second stitch is this silver color, so I will be purling with the silver. And when I pick up my yarns, I always pick up, when I'm ready to use the next yarn or the color again, you pick it up from under. and then you purl that, and then you pick it up from under and purl that, and you keep doing that. And as you can see, what's happening, my yarn is twisting. So that's what causes or will cause, in essence, 100, in this case 152 twists in the yarn, but they will all be untwisted when I come around in the second pass. So the first thing is, can you purl first stitch, drop your working yarn, grab the silver from underneath, you always grab from underneath, and then purl the next stitch. And then you drop that, and then you, from underneath, grab the pink and purl that. Then drop that and grab the silver from underneath, purl that. And so you keep doing this, going all the way around. Now, correct any tension with the next stitch. So for example, this pink right here is kind of loose, so you correct that tension when you purl the next stitch, because you pull it taut. You see how loopy that is? So from underneath, and pull it snug, and purl. From underneath, pull it snug. And see, that will correct the tension from the prior stitch, because it's kind of loose, because you're not necessarily holding on to it. It's hard to actually hold on to each yarn, because normally when I knit Fair Isle, I'm a two-handed knitter, but because we are twisting, that's what makes it difficult to constantly keep, because you're constantly switching the yarn in this case, my left hand, because I'm knitting continental. So if you want to take a look at what's going on, you can see already these floats here, and that's what's creating this chevron that's pointing to the right, because we're doing a right pointing chevron. So I'm going to go all the way around, and then I will come back and meet you and show you what it looks like. Okay, so I'm coming up on the last few stitches of this first pass of purling, and the yarn, you can see, is really twisted up. I'm trying to keep the twist away from the actual edge of where my work is, you know, where the stitches are. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to slip your stitch marker, and you're going to do one more purl by pulling that working yarn underneath to link it to the beginning of the next round. Okay, so now we're still purling, but instead of grabbing from underneath, we're going over top of the last working yarn. So now what we're doing is we're twisting in the opposite direction over, which will slowly start to unravel these two yarns back to separate working yarns, because they're raveled pretty tight. Always make sure you're going over on the second pass. And there's a lot of tension in the yarn because of the fact that they're wrapped so many times at the top. So see, that's the tension. But every time you pass, over the top, you're releasing some of it. And actually, some people Fair Isle knit this way by constantly twisting the yarns over each other with regard to the floats, as opposed to always pulling from the same area and keeping the floats aligned that way, which is basically how it's done when you are two-handed knitting. And so what some people like to do when they do this method for Fair Isle knitting, which is basically the same thing, but it's just on the back, as you can see what's happening in the back. You see that looks the knitted, they're actually columns of knitting. And interestingly, neither one is in dominance when you twist the yarns for your floats, as opposed to yarn dominance. So this is pink, the pink is the yarn dominance. But when you twist your working yarns, each stitch is equal in tension, and so you don't have that issue. So what some people do when they do this method is they pre-twist the yarn for several instances of twisting the yarn when they Fair Isle. So they pre-twist it, and then they do this to unravel it in the opposite direction, as opposed to knitting first and then going and having to unravel manually. They manually twist it first, and then it automatically untwists when each time they do carry a float that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep going all the way around, and I will come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so I'm coming up the last few stitches of this second pass. And to do a Latvian braid, it's only 2 passes, but you can keep doing this. This would make a really cool design if you just keep doing this, purling like that, because it in essence creates a zigzag effect. Just make sure that you are twisting in the correct direction, which of course, and the way you can think about it, it's a left twist versus a right twist. So we started doing a right twist, and now we're doing a left twist. So what that means is if you want your chevron or your braid to point to the left, when you do your first row of purling or Fair Isle purling, you would start off by twisting to the left. Remember, we started off by twisting to the right. So if you want these arrows to go in this direction, you would just start that first round of purling by twisting to the left, and then when you do your second round, you twist it to the right, and that unravels it. And again, as you're going along, if you notice a rat's nest or what appears to be a knot in your working yarns, do not touch it. Don't pull at it, don't try to unravel it, don't pick at it, because it will automatically undo that rat's nest. I had one that was about here, and as you can see now, they are both of my yarns are separate again. So they were twisted pretty good. And of course the amount of twisting has to do with the number of stitches you're doing this across. But this is how I started, and this is how I ended with the very last stitch. And now I am done with my Latvian braid. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue on doing the hat portion. So I'm just going to be knitting the next several rounds up to the crown. So that is how you do a Latvian braid. And again, this was a right pointing Latvian braid. You can do a left one as well, just by switching how you do the twists. Thank you for watching my video. Please do subscribe to my channel, and also please do provide feedback and comments. I do welcome and appreciate them. Thank you for watching.